So thanks, Alan. Thanks, everybody who's here. So my name is Howard, and as you probably guessed, I'm going to talk about the exciting world of faxing. I'm also going to guess, and this is just a guess. I don't know, but it's rather an assumption that that's probably the first and maybe last time that phrase is going to be uttered from this stage. So I guess we'll see, right? There's always next year. So the thing about faxing is that usually people have really strong feelings about faxing, right? And they're not always like the greatest feelings. And I'd like to tell you that my friend Dell Geek here, right, that this is the outlier opinion and the people love faxing, right? I'd like to be able to tell you that, but I can assure you that that is not the way that people view faxing. And so maybe before we kind of go on, it pays for me to kind of give you a little bit of history about how I got into faxing and the exciting world that exists there. So my co-founder of Phaxio, Josh, a while ago, we were working on a different project. And the project that we were working on at that time had to do with helping people build mobile sites. It was a platform for people to build mobile sites. And it turned out that a lot of our clients were restaurants. And the restaurants came to us and said, hey, listen, we want to be able to accept orders. We want to do online ordering, right? And this was just when like the iPhone was becoming a whole thing and people were right? And they said, well, we want people to be able to fill out forms and send the orders in. And we said, that's great. We can do that. We'll create the forms and we'll let you guys upload things. And then we'll send you the orders by email it, and it'll be great. And they said, absolutely not. I don't want the orders by email, I want them by fax. So we said, no, we're not doing that. And they said, well, then we're going to go somewhere else. So we said, yeah, no, it's no problem, we'll do it. We'll figure it out. So my co-founder, Josh, said, let me go take a look. Let's see what kind of APIs exist. And this is already about 8 years ago, I want to say. And so we started to look around. And Josh said to me, hey, I can build a better API than what's out here. All these APIs, they're super crusty. They're like old school telecom and throttling and all this stuff that I don't want to deal with. That's not how CPaaS was just kind of becoming a thing, right? And that's not how this is supposed to work. I can build a better API. And so we said, all right, fine, let's build something. And so he did. And so he built this really great API. And people would come to us and say, can you, I could also use faxing. Everybody's always like a little ashamed to admit it, right? But hey, if you have that faxing thing, I'd like to use it too. Don't tell my friends. And so we said that's fine. So we kind of productized it and we turned it out. But the thing about it was, right, that Josh is a software engineer, and I am a scientist. I'm a political scientist. And don't laugh. That's serious science, man. So I didn't know anything about telecom, and he didn't really know anything about telecom. And so our first version, right, we had this really great API, but underneath the API, we had no idea actually how to make any fax calls. We didn't know how to make phone calls, forget fax calls. So we had to come up with this way to do it, and the initial version of Phaxio then was that we had this great API, but what would happen in the back end is we would take your request, we would pull it apart, then we put it on top of a top of an email to fax like service, and we would rip it apart, and then we would kind of programmatically, obviously, feed it through that service, and so that service would then take it and send out the faxes, right? And so that was great. It worked really well. We didn't have to do any of the hard work, except for maintain the API, of course. But the problem was, as you would probably assume, we had no control over how long it took to send the faxes. And so people would come into us and they'd say, hey, how long does it take you guys to send faxes? And we'd say, it takes about 5 minutes, right? Maybe if you're lucky, it takes 2 minutes. But really, we had no idea how to even be lucky. Just sometimes it went in 2 minutes and sometimes it went in 5 minutes. And so as the service started to expand, we said, that's probably not appropriate. We should start doing this ourselves. And so we started to look around. We started to grab the different pieces that we thought we would need to build out a service like this, right? And so, we had the hosting here, and we had the monitoring tools. But when we started to look around and talk to the telcos about faxing, they always always uttered this phrase, and at the time I was reading the contracts that they would give us, and I'm no lawyer because I'm a political scientist. And so I'm reading through these contracts, and they keep talking about this thing, this best effort. Hey, all the calls that you want to make, this faxing, we'll do faxing, but it's all best effort. Like, you know, maybe it'll work. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, how am I supposed to tell people, right, that our service is best effort, that it'll like kind of work, right? Who wants to buy a service that kind of works? And so you had these two guys, right, me and my co-founder, you had the two of us sitting here saying, hey, we need something that's going to be reliable. We're building this service so that it can be as reliable as possible. Meanwhile, all the experts are telling us that the best that we're ever going to do is best effort, right? And so we had to figure out how to take the two pieces that we had and put them together to create the service that we wanted to be able to offer, that we wanted to be able to see, and that people were asking us to deliver for them, right? And so that's how we came up with this idea about that if we design a service, right, even if the underlying medium is faxing, if we design the service well and we design the service right, then it should work properly. That's how engineering works, right? Nobody builds a bridge and says you can drive over it, but it's best effort, might fall apart on you, right? If we design it well, if we do it right, that's how it's supposed to, it should work that way. And that failures should be the anomaly. And usually what happens is in faxing, people will tell you like, you know, it's like 80%, 90%, whatever. But for us, it was really important to make sure that we built the service that was super simple and reliable and efficient, right? And that's how we came out with that's how we ended up building faxing, right? And that's where it went. It went into this place that it was going to be simple. It was going to be easy to use, right? And it was going to be extremely reliable. We got a post for the picture. And so, when we turned around to customers and we went out to sell to them, or when they came to us, right? It wasn't ever a matter of best effort. And when this phrase would come up, we would talk about, hey, listen, we don't do best effort. You know, best effort. You want best effort? There's another guy who will give you best effort. When you come to us, you're going to get a reliable service. And the reason that that's important is because faxing is almost exclusively tied to revenue. So it's funny because, you know, people talk about, hey, you know, what's fax going to do? Where's it going to go? How's it going to be? But the problem is that it's really important that faxing works. And for people who are buying faxing, right, it's really important to them that faxing works. Because on the other side, right, if you're sending the fax, you're receiving the fax, on the other side there's usually revenue tied to that fax. They're using fax because they have to use fax because fax is what's going to get them paid, right? And so I kind of bring up 5 industries here. I don't know, you know, I don't often send faxes. I don't ever really send faxes. The only reason I send faxes nowadays is because there happens to be a fax machine in my office, right? But I don't really send faxes. I don't know how many people here do. But if you have sent a fax, there's a good chance that one of these industries is the reason that you had to send a fax, right? If it's finance, and so we work with some of the, I think it's the largest actively managed fund company, you know, finance company in the U.S. for sure, maybe in the world. And so they will allow you, right, to open an account or to move assets around, right, to move equities around. You can do all those things, but if you want to do them, you've got to take a document, you've got to print it out, you've got to sign it, you've got to fax it back into them, right? When it comes to things like healthcare, right, there's a doctor, there's a pharmacy on the other side. In order for that pharmacist to get paid, he's got to get the prescription. Right? In order for the doctor to see the patient, he has to get the medical record. In order for the lab to run your blood work, they have to get the order from the doctor. All 3 of those cases require fax, for sure in the US, require fax, and none of them get paid unless that fax goes out or comes back in. I mean, we can go through legal, right? We can kind of talk through all the cases. Logistics, right? The logistics companies, they need the inventory, they need the driver logs. All of those things have to go one after the other. They all move by fax. It's still the way that it moves around. And the reason there is that they have to have the document, right? The document is inherently important. They want that document quickly, and of course, the document is eventually then tied to revenue. And so this is when we kind of set out to build faxing and to, right, we wanted to build this idea, this easy, simple and reliable, right? And so that meant that uptime needed to be there, right? We needed to have the API, the best API that was around, without question. Almost. We needed to have pricing that was obvious to people in the C-suite, right, who didn't actually care about the API. So while the developers might care on one side, right, the C-level or the executives, they only cared on the other side, right? I don't really care about what your API looks like. That's not my problem. That's somebody else's problem. I only care about how much I'm going to pay for it. How much are you going to charge me? Are there going to be fees? Where are the fees? And so we made sure that that was really simple. And the kind of the cornerstone there was that it was reliable. Right? If you gave us a fax, we were going to figure out a way to get it to the other side. And if we couldn't figure out a way to get it to the other side, we would sit down and we would make sure that we could. And it was really about that just unquestionable reliability. We're going to be here for you, right? And we're going to make sure that your fax is delivered. And so people, right, the big question that everybody loves to talk about as well, faxing, it's dying, right? Like, who uses it? Why does it have to be used? And I hope that I've somewhat convinced you at least that it's there. But it's also this question about, well, it's not really dying, right? It's just kind of continuing. And a lot of that, again, I think, is that it's directly tied to revenue. And a lot of people look at something like email and say, hey, listen, what about email? I can move documents by email. Right? So there are different questions, there are different answers, rather, to why that's not necessarily true. I think, right, and I could give you that there's regulatory reasons. In the US, there's HIPAA, there's high trust, there's all kinds of stuff about moving the documents around. But some of the real reasons around that, right, are that it's important and that it works really well. So yeah, I don't often send faxes. But if you are a person who says, hey, listen, I need this document, I need it right now, then it ends up being pretty efficient if you can type in 10 numbers, right, and click a button, and boom, the document prints out on the other side. And on top, I lost the bottom. And on top of that, the faxing is actually still growing, right? And that's kind of the slide that people always get kind of confused about. Like, I don't understand. Where are all these fax machines? Who's buying them? But faxing continues to grow, especially as it moves to virtualization. It continues to grow and is projected to grow. I forget exactly what it is. I think the compound annual revenue growth is something like, another 15 or 16% for sure for the next 10 years, I want to say, are the projections there. And so then people always say to me, all right, fine, got it, faxing. I don't want to do it, but it's there, we have to do it, fine. But like, what happens after that? So you've sent me the document, right, whoop-de-doo, who cares? And so I guess kind of to give you a glimpse into the roadmap that I have in my mind, right? First, we wanted to make sure that we built something that was easy, reliable, simple, right, as I've kind of laid out earlier. Then we wanted to add in some of this, what we'll call next-gen faxing, which is, yeah, there's a machine on one side, there's a machine on the other side. We're going to start to virtualize part of this process. So what's it going to look like, right? What can we add in? What are just the nice little pieces on top that we can add in to make sure that it works better, right? That we can really bring faxing up to, I say, the speed of the internet, right? What are the things that you would expect that you can do with a text message that you wouldn't have been able to do with a fax? How can we do that? How can we enhance it there? And then on top of that, we start to look about manipulating documents. Well, right, if you're faxing them, almost got ahead of myself. If you're faxing things, well, then we've got documents. How can we help you manipulate those documents so that after you've received them, we can start to do, we can start to do OCR, we can start to play around with them. And then on top of that, right, then I think it morphs the question into less about the faxing piece, and that faxing is really the medium, but the way that we've approached everything is that we're really a software company. It just so happens that the medium that we're using, right, to speak to clients is really faxing. And so once we start to kind of abstract that out, then we take this other approach about, all right, well now we've got all these documents, right? We've got this way to move them around, and what can we do next? And so that's something that we show up to work to evolve on. Right? People don't really like to evolve. There aren't that many people who love to evolve in the faxing space, as you've probably guessed. But that's something that we're looking at, and I think that we don't necessarily look at it as just fax. We look at fax as kind of that underlying medium. We just so happen to be a software company, or Phaxio was a software company that that used faxing, and that was just the medium that we had as we kind of walked forward. So there we go. Now I got it up. All right, we got questions to start.
Excellent. Well done, Howard.
It's always exciting to know what the fax questions are going to be.
So how many times have you been approached by Adobe?
We have spoken, we've spoken with a number of larger corporations. So we were actually just acquired a little while ago by the largest wholesale carrier in the US. But we continue to explore similar type partnerships, not all of which I can speak about. But yeah, about Adobe DocuSign, there's all kinds of stuff there. And so we work with some of those players as well as some really large hardware players who have kind of approached us and said, hey, we really like this. Let's see how we can use it too, to enhance what we have. So I can't quite speak to it.
Oh, fax it to me.
You got it.
Go for it, Greg.
Okay. So thanks for this presentation. I like it. So it shows us that we shouldn't forget about legacy stuff. Talking about this cool new stuff, and especially I've been in the situation that many times fax was just showstopper for many businesses like mining, whatever. And my question is, are you thinking about applying new technologies like blockchain for legacy use cases like fax?
So I'll tell you that I haven't. I haven't kind of gone down that. On my team, we have some guys who are super into blockchain, and so I'm sure that while I haven't been pushing that, they're kind of walking there. And it's the same type of thing where it's taking this older technology and faxing, right, and bringing it and kind of mixing it together with blockchain technology and new ways of seeing. New ways of kind of viewing this older technology. And so I haven't, I'm just kind of saying, I haven't pushed blockchain on top of faxing. I'm about 1,000% sure that the more technical, I'm a scientist, right? But the more technical part of our team, that's what they do. They sit there and they do exactly that. Hey, listen, we've got blockchain. How can we use this technology, right? Even if I'm going to use faxing, how can I figure out a way to kind of meld those technologies together to give me something that's even greater?
Final one here.
So good presentation. I can't believe I actually have a fax question.
Right. No. You don't have to be embarrassed. No. You can come right after this. We're going to go to Faxing Anonymous.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. So anyway, one of the things that I discovered many years ago doing some faxing and a lot of faxing is that if the fax worked, the network was in good shape, and if the fax didn't work, the network was in bad shape, generally. This is kind of a general rule. So all of these utilities used to test networks proved to be useless when you just simply tried to send a fax. That was a better proxy. So have you ever thought about using your entire solution purely to test the efficiency and reliability of someone else's network as a service? So
for us, I can tell you that I think that there were people who did just that, so we really released it as a platform. And there were people who I think were doing that. Some of the larger public players kind of came to us and said, hey, I'd like to make sure that our network can work and that we can send faxes and all that stuff. And in certain cases even asked our team to step up and test it for them. Hey, can you build us the tool, right, to test that our network can also handle faxing? More recently, we were acquired by a carrier, so we don't do that as much anymore for other carriers. But yeah, so it was there. We were doing that. Like I said, we were doing that. We're literally. I remember sitting on a call when a guy said, "Hey, we're going to release a faxing product, and we want it to work as well as yours. Can you test it for us?" I said, "You want me to you're going to launch something to compete with me, and then you want me to tell you how to make it better?" And they said, "Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good for you." I said, "I don't know if that's good for me." But yeah, so there were people out there who did that. I think that there's still people who do that. It's an open, Phaxio itself exists still as an open platform, so anybody can do it. You know, we don't shut down competition even if they use our stuff. But now it's, I guess, it's a little bit more complicated because we're owned by by the largest U.S. carrier or wholesale carrier.
But again, sorry for time. So again, thank you so much, Howard, for an excellent and very lively fax presentation.